the Cougars and Utes began playing in 1896, when Brigham Young University was actually Brigham Young Academy. The two schools split 6 games before football was discontinued at the academy. While Utah counts these 6 contests in its official record, BYU does not.
The most difficult thing to try to come to terms with is we were an academy. We were largely a high school with a few college students. And when you look at those teams that played, they were playing the YMCA, they were playing a lot of high schools, they were playing club teams, and our team was largely made up of high school kids. And so when you're talking about your history in intercollegiate athletics, it's really hard to count those games.
After football was reinstated at BYU, the two programs resumed their rivalry in 1922, when BYU considers its record official. Ike Armstrong's Utes dominated for the next 2 decades, going undefeated against the Cougars. Amid 17 losses to Utah, the best BYU could muster was a tie, 3 times.
Year after year, since the 20s of BYU playing Utah, it'd be nothing but futility. It'd been getting your butt kicked, getting your head bashed in, and year after year, season after season, and every game was the same, you lost.
Up until 1942, it hadn't been much of a rivalry, because I think in order for it to be a rivalry, you have to have at least both teams winning it from time to time. And BYU had never won a game in the first 20 tries. They'd tied a couple, but they'd never actually come away with a win.
Everything changed with the 1942 season. With the world at war, fellow assistant coach Wayne Soph and head coach Eddie Kimball both enlisted in the Navy, leaving Floyd Millett all alone to coach the team.
They basically turned everything over to Floyd. Floyd had been the head basketball coach at that time, and he took responsibilities for basically coaching everything. It was just a unique time. The season was shortened because of the war efforts, and eventually the next 3 years of BYU football were canceled.
Millett knew all too well that BYU had never beaten Utah. As a player, he had been on the losing end before. But prior to the 21st meeting between the two schools, he told the Salt Lake Tribune, "We'll beat them." 2 of the sons of Brigham also expressed confidence ahead of the big game. In a devotional assembly the previous spring, halfback Jim Hecker publicly predicted that Brigham Young would trip the Utes. And tackle Ken Bird, who was also the senior class president, said, "As far as I'm concerned, the senior class project for this year is to beat Utah." Away from home, the rivalry game was also on the minds of former coaches and players, who now wore a uniform of a different kind. Eddie Kimball sent a telegram to Floyd Millett saying, "It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog that counts." Wayne Soph also sent a telegram writing, "A team that won't be beaten can't be beaten." Vaughn Kimball, who would have been the Cougars quarterback that year had he not joined the Navy, said, "There is one thing more important than the war, and that to beat Utah. This accomplishment would aid the morale of 25,000 alumni and aid the war effort."
Every year leading up to it, we were getting closer, and it wasn't that the games weren't hard fought or close. And so it was maybe a way just to reconnect with the program and also maybe not think about the war and some of the things that were going on.
On October 10th, 1942, the two teams converged at Utes Stadium in Salt Lake City, and the game lived up to all the hype. BYU took the lead in the second quarter when Frank Whitney went over center for the touchdown to complete a 60-yard drive. A missed extra point would leave the Cougars ahead 6-0. In the second half, Utah blocked a BYU punt, and the Utes took the lead when fullback Woody Peterson scored a touchdown. Then in the fourth quarter, BYU returned the favor by blocking a Utah punt that rolled out of bounds at the 10-yard line. Then on 4th and goal at the 4-yard line, Herman Longhurst ran to the right side and into the end zone to give the Cougars a 12-7 lead. Utah got deep into BYU territory, facing a 4th down inside the 10-yard line. Hampered with an ankle injury, Ken Bird limped onto the field to help his defense and stopped Wayne Page in his tracks at the 5-yard line with just 3 minutes left.
I can only imagine when they held Utah on 4th down, turned the ball over, which in essence sealed the victory. I'm sure it was an amazing feeling to do that.
Euphoria, wild. The millennium had arrived. It was a great game. It's the first game in the history of the world that we beat Utah. and we beat them by a rousing score of 12-7, but we beat them.
Heber Woolsey graduated from BYU in 1942 and was in attendance at the game, with more than just his pride on the line.
One of my friends was this Alan C. Ainsley. He's a University of Utah Wild fan, and he bet me $1 that Utah would beat us. I said, not going to beat us this year. He said, we'll always beat you. Of course we'll beat you. I said, not this year. So I bet him $1, and when I got it, he had it tied in up this way. So I thought it was good for the ages. So I said, one from Alan C. Ainsley in the year of modern football, number 1, October the 10th, 1942, BYU 12, University of Utah 7.
BYU was not yet known as the quarterback factory. The Cougars completed just 1 of 9 passes for 5 yards and 2 interceptions, but rushed for 152 yards in the victory.
It was just like all the other games, really hard fought, back and forth. So it was a typical BYU-Utah battle.
But the real battle began after the game.
What I remember most of all was trying to get the goalposts afterwards. Some big bruiser came up to me and says, where are you from? I said, BYU, why? He says, why don't you go and get those goalposts, little boy blue?
They said that the skirmish went on for at least an hour and a half. There was police there, and there was some fighting going on and pushing and shoving and people defending the goalpost.
BYU fans stormed the field and went after the south goalpost. Utah fans frantically defended it, while 3 BYU students slipped down and tore down the north posts. A Daily Herald reporter explained what happened next. Military police sent out to quell the fisticuffs that went with the attacks on the goalposts fell a victim to the brainy strategy of the Utah band leader. The band struck up the Star-Spangled Banner just as the burly MPs hit the field, and they had no alternative but to stand at attention until the band quit. However, the fighters did not have any such restrictions, for the battle continued unabated. In the end, both goalposts were missing. What happened is somewhat of a mystery.
When you research from the University of Utah side of things, they claim that they got the goalposts out and went and hid them in a field house. I talked to band members and others from BYU who claimed that they had taken at least one of the goalposts and took it back to Utah. It's really hard not to believe that one of the goalposts came down, because I've seen pieces of it. And so you got to believe they got something. I don't think they busted up the benches on the sidelines. And from what I've seen, they certainly look like pieces of the goalpost.
In reality, both stories have some truth to them. Cougar fans captured one of the standards, while the rest of the 2 goalposts were salvaged by Utah, until an act of truest sportsmanship brought them to Provo the following Monday. Provo Mayor Maurice Harding declared Monday, October 12th, Victory Day, saying, henceforth time will be reckoned from last Saturday, the day BYU started beating Utah.
It was such a great moment for the university and the football program of having arrived. We finally beat our rival. That they declared it a holiday and canceled school and had a celebration for the team. During the celebration, Utah Student Body President Bob Barker presented the remainder of the goalposts to BYU Student Body President and quarterback Mark Weed. He said, "We think that the Y deserves the rest of the goalposts in recognition of their first victory over the Utes in 20 years. Today, a piece of one of those goalposts rests in Legacy Hall on the campus of Brigham Young University." BYU would wait 16 more years for another victory over Utah, but the foundation had been laid.
As far as I'm concerned, it's the biggest game BYU ever played. And we beat them. It never before happened.
Heber got this copy of the paper and gave it to me and showed me, he had kept this all those years in a drawer, and that's what it meant to him. It was kind of fun to talk to him about that. It was big enough for the Salt Lake Telegraph back then to put a great big banner headline, and when you do that in sports, that's a pretty big deal in newspapers. It was a turning point, at least in the competitive atmosphere that was not competitive.
I think it's a real turning point in the program to finally get over that hump, because in those first 20 years there were some good wins, but you got to beat your rival. The 45 miles separate the 2 campuses. If they're going to cancel school, it had to have been a great moment for the university and something that they wanted to celebrate.
In the decades that have followed, BYU has defeated Utah in some unforgettable rivalry matchups. But in the midst of conflict abroad and heavy hearts at home, the 1942 team forever holds the distinction as the first to ever beat Utah.